You've probably sensed it already. A creeping dullness spreading everywhere. Open any social feed and you'll see it. Millions of people parroting slogans they barely understand, believing what they're told without question, reacting to every trivial story like it's the end of the world. It's not just ignorance, it's something deeper, something Carl Jung might have called collective regression, a mass slide back into childish thinking, driven by fear and ego. We are living in an epidemic of stupidity, and it thrives on distraction, emotional reactivity, and a refusal to think for ourselves. But why does this happen? Why do societies that pride themselves on progress become so easily manipulated, so quick to surrender their reason? If you've ever wondered why so many people prefer comforting lies over uncomfortable truths, this video is going to break it down, not to mock anyone, but to help you recognize the forces that pull entire populations into intellectual decay, and more importantly, how you can escape it, the anatomy of collective stupidity. First, understand that stupidity isn't the absence of intelligence, it's the unwillingness to use it. A person can be highly educated and still profoundly foolish if they surrender their curiosity in exchange for belonging. Jung warned that whenever people are cut off from their inner life, their real values, their own thinking, they look for something external to fill the gap. And nothing fills that emptiness faster than the collective opinion. It feels safe, it feels certain, it feels like purpose. But it comes with a cost, the death of discernment. When you stop examining your beliefs, you start outsourcing your judgment. And the moment you do that, you become easy to control. Manufactured outrage. Look around and you'll notice people are addicted to outrage. Every headline is designed to provoke an instant reaction, to bypass reflection and trigger tribal loyalty. This is no accident. A calm, thinking person can't be easily manipulated, but an angry one can. If you feel constantly agitated, if every day brings a new crisis that demands your emotional allegiance, know that you are being played. The game is simple. Keep you in a state of perpetual reactivity so you don't have the space to think, because a population that doesn't think is easy to herd. The disappearance of silence. Jung believed that silence is where the psyche finds itself again. But in today's world, silence has almost vanished. Every spare moment is filled with noise, notifications, opinions, entertainment. And in that constant stream of stimulation, something precious is lost. The ability to hear your own thoughts. This is why many people feel hollow when they put the phone down. They haven't built a relationship with their own mind. So they reach again for distraction. Another video, another headline, another hit of stimulation. And the cycle continues. How the herd mind forms. Collective stupidity always begins with isolation from self. When you don't trust your own perceptions, you look to the group to tell you what is real. And the group is rarely interested in truth. It's interested in cohesion, approval, and power. So it creates narratives that everyone must repeat, even if they make no sense. The more absurd the narrative, the more power it has. Because repeating nonsense signals loyalty better than repeating truth. This is how entire societies can fall into collective delusion, and why it feels so dangerous to question it. Because when you reject the herd story, you risk exile. Most people would rather be accepted and wrong than alone and right. That is why stupidity spreads faster than wisdom. It rewards conformity and punishes doubt. But if you want to remain free, you must reclaim your ability to stand apart, to think in silence, even when everyone else is screaming. The seduction of certainty. One of the reasons this epidemic has spread so far is that certainty feels better than truth. People would rather be wrong together than uncertain alone. Jung saw this as a natural human instinct. The psyche craves stability. And when life feels overwhelming, when the world seems too big, too fast, too complex, people cling to simple answers. They trade the discomfort of nuance for the comfort of slogans. But here's the problem. Certainty without questioning is not wisdom. It's just a tranquilizer. It dulls your mind and makes you obedient. Watch for this in yourself. Whenever you feel the pull to declare something absolutely true, ask where that impulse comes from. Is it genuine clarity, or is it the relief of not having to think any further? If you're honest, you'll see that most convictions are more about avoiding anxiety than discovering reality. How entertainment becomes indoctrination. It's tempting to believe you're immune, that you see through all the manipulation. But the truth is, you're surrounded by messaging designed to shape your beliefs without you noticing. Entertainment doesn't just amuse you, it primes you. It plants stories about who you should be, what you should fear, and what you should worship. And because it comes wrapped in humor and spectacle, your defenses never activate. Jung understood this mechanism intuitively. The unconscious absorbs what the conscious mind dismisses as just entertainment. So while you laugh at the sitcom or the viral video, your psyche quietly swallows the worldview it's selling. This is why entire populations can start repeating the same phrases, sharing the same shallow opinions, fearing the same enemies, without realizing they've been programmed. Tribalism masquerading as morality. Look closely, and you'll see how morality has been hijacked by the herd. Instead of a personal commitment to principles, it becomes a social performance. People parade their beliefs not because they live them, but because they signal belonging. And the more aggressively they enforce them, the less likely they are to practice them privately. Nietzsche warned about this over a century ago, that most virtue is just vanity in disguise. But Jung took it further, observing that collective morality often conceals the shadow, the disowned parts of ourselves we project onto others. When you see mobs condemning some group or idea with righteous fury, understand this: they're not just defending values, they're discharging their own unconscious guilt. It feels easier to hunt the bad people out there than to face the hypocrisy inside, the addiction to distraction. This epidemic of thoughtlessness doesn't only thrive on ideology, it needs distraction to survive. Because if you sat quietly with yourself, you'd start to notice how little of your identity is truly yours. You'd see how much of what you believe was implanted by parents, teachers, media, and peers. And that recognition is terrifying. So you keep scrolling, you keep watching, you keep consuming. Anything to avoid that moment when the mask begins to slip. Jung wrote that most people will do almost anything to avoid meeting their own soul. Distraction is how we stay asleep. But if you want to escape this epidemic, you'll have to endure moments of discomfort. You'll have to turn off the noise and risk feeling alone with your thoughts. That's where real intelligence starts to grow again. The loss of critical thinking. If there is one skill the epidemic of stupidity fears most, it is critical thinking. Not the kind that simply argues or contradicts, but the deeper kind. The ability to pause and to question your own assumptions and to ask, how do I know this is true? Most people never develop this reflex. They inherit beliefs and treat them like facts. They confuse familiarity with evidence. Jung believed this happens because the ego doesn't want to feel exposed. When you question what you've always believed, you confront the possibility that your identity is built on illusions. And that feels like annihilation. So instead, people double down. They shout slogans louder. They repeat opinions more often. They cling to the herd more tightly. Because certainty feels safer than inquiry. But safety is not the same as truth. If you want to escape the contagion, you must risk being uncomfortable. You must be willing to say, I don't know, even when everyone else is pretending they do. The fear of solitude. Collective stupidity thrives on one primal fear, the fear of being alone. It's why people nod along with ideas they secretly doubt. It's why they laugh at jokes they don't find funny. It's why they pretend to care about things that bore them. Jung called this the herd instinct, a longing so ancient it overrides logic. He warned that solitude isn't just physical isolation. It's the ability to stand apart in thought, to hold your own perspective without needing it to be validated. But in a culture addicted to likes and consensus, solitude feels like death. And so people surrender their minds to the crowd. They believe what everyone else believes, not because it's true, but because it feels less frightening. But here's the paradox. Real self-respect grows in those moments when you dare to dissent, when you refuse to pretend, when you choose authenticity over approval, the false gods of progress. We like to imagine that technology has made us smarter, more informed, more advanced. But if you measure intelligence by depth of understanding, not by speed of reaction, you'll see we've regressed. We know more facts but comprehend less meaning. We skim more content but reflect on fewer ideas. We collect data but rarely integrate it into wisdom. Jung warned that modernity would produce an emptiness, a spiritual vacuum that people would try to fill with gadgets, noise, and novelty. He was right. Today, people worship progress like an idol, imagining that every new tool or trend will finally make them whole. But tools can't give you purpose. Only self-examination can do that. The courage to see clearly. Escaping this epidemic isn't complicated, but it requires courage. Courage to question what you've been taught. Courage to slow down when everyone else is speeding up. Courage to sit quietly without rushing to fill the silence. When you reclaim your attention, you begin to see the world differently. You notice how most outrage is manufactured, how most opinions are recycled, how most conflicts are staged to keep you reactive. And you start to wonder, what if I chose to step out of this circus? What if you didn't have to be outraged all the time? What if you allowed yourself to think slowly, to consider more than one side, to remain calm in a culture addicted to drama? Jung called this the birth of individual consciousness. It's not a comfortable path, but it is the only one that leads to freedom. The hidden cost of conformity. Most people don't realize what they sacrifice to stay accepted. They give up their independent thinking, their intuition, and the quiet voice that whispers, "This doesn't feel right." Instead, they trade it all for a sense of belonging. Jung observed that the collective mind has no conscience. It doesn't care about truth or integrity. It only cares about unity, even if that unity is built on delusion. When you merge with the crowd, you inherit its blind spots. You stop questioning. You stop feeling. You become part of a machine that operates on automatic impulses. It's comfortable at first. You feel safe, validated, ordinary. But over time, something vital begins to die. The part of you capable of wonder. The part that notices beauty. The part that hungers for meaning. This is why so many people wake up in midlife and feel an inexplicable emptiness. They followed every rule. They stayed loyal to the herd. They did everything right, and still they feel hollow. That is the price of conformity. You can have safety, but you will lose yourself. The power of inner authority. Jung believed the antidote to this epidemic wasn't more information. It was the cultivation of inner authority. Inner authority means you learn to trust your own perceptions, even when they contradict what everyone else insists is true. It means you value your direct experience over secondhand opinions. It doesn't mean you're always right. It means you are willing to think for yourself, to revise your beliefs as you grow, and to stand alone when necessary. This is rare, because most people were never taught how to think. They were taught what to think. Schools rewarded memorization, not inquiry. Families rewarded obedience, not reflection. Cultures rewarded agreement, not discernment. So it feels radical to pause and ask, do I actually believe this? But this pause is how you begin to escape. Why silence is revolutionary. In a world addicted to constant commentary, silence has become an act of rebellion. It is in silence that you start to hear your real thoughts, not the ones implanted by algorithms, but the ones that arise from your own depths. Jung believed that in this silence, the soul begins to speak, and what it says may disrupt everything you thought you knew. You may discover that you don't actually care about the things you pretend to. You may realize that your deepest convictions were inherited, not chosen. You may see that most of your anxiety comes from trying to keep up with collective expectations you never agreed to. This is why people avoid silence, because it reveals the cost of their conformity, the call to self-responsibility. Freedom isn't free. It demands that you take responsibility for your mind, your choices, and your reactions. It requires that you stop blaming the herd for your own participation in it. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, but in that acceptance, you reclaim your power. When you see how easily you were conditioned, you stop pretending you're above the influence. And that humility makes you stronger, because now you can choose differently. You can step away from the noise, even if it means feeling alone for a while. And in that solitude, you'll find something the herd can never offer you, a genuine connection to your own soul." The return to authenticity. Once you've seen through the collective illusions, there is no going back. You will never again feel fully comfortable pretending. You will notice how often conversations are scripted, how frequently opinions are borrowed, how rarely people pause to reflect. This can feel lonely, but it is also the beginning of something priceless: authenticity. When you stop living by other people's scripts, you begin to discover who you actually are, not as an identity to display, but as a living, unfolding reality. You start to feel a quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need constant validation. Jung taught that this self-possession is the mark of maturity. It means you can stand in your own center, unmoved by every gust of collective hysteria. It doesn't make you superior, it makes you free, reclaiming your mind. The epidemic of stupidity isn't just about other people, it lives inside you too. Every time you react without thinking, every time you parrot a belief without examining it, every time you choose comfort over curiosity, you participate in it. That doesn't make you bad, it makes you human. But you don't have to stay there. You can decide, moment by moment, to reclaim your attention, to question your assumptions, to interrupt the trance. Imagine this. Instead of compulsively checking your phone, you pause. You take a breath. You ask, "What am I avoiding?" Instead of reacting to every headline, you ask, "Is this even true?" Instead of seeking the herd's approval, you listen to your own conscience. These small acts are revolutionary because they restore the sovereignty you were born with, the sovereignty you've been taught to forget, the quiet revolution. Jung believed that true change doesn't begin in institutions or governments. It begins in individuals who dare to see clearly. It begins with you. When you cultivate inner authority, you become immune to the epidemic. When you create silence in your life, you recover your original mind. When you choose authenticity over approval, you light a path others can follow. This doesn't require perfection. It only requires the willingness to be honest, to admit when you've been fooled, to laugh at your old certainties, to stay curious even when it's easier to conform. Because the truth is, every time you choose awareness over reflex, you weaken the epidemic's hold. You become a living example that another way is possible. And even if no one notices right away, your presence ripples out farther than you can measure. The invitation. So here's the invitation. Next time you feel the pull of the collective, the outrage, the distraction, the mindless agreement, pause, just for a breath, and ask yourself, is this really mine? If it isn't, let it go. Return to the quiet space inside you, where thought is slow, where perception is clear, where your own soul speaks. That is where you will find the antidote to this epidemic. Not in more information, not in louder opinions, but in the simple, radical act of thinking for yourself. If this message resonates, share it with someone who might be ready to wake up. And remember, escaping stupidity isn't about feeling superior. It's about reclaiming your birthright, a mind that is your own, a life guided by truth rather than noise. Stay awake,